rather almost sing for a while. That was great. Love it, love it, love it. So we left off with this question right here. What happened to the dinosaurs? And I wish that I could just stand up here and say, well, you know, all the dinosaurs died out because of blank. But the reality is we don't know for sure. And I don't have a problem looking at you saying we don't know for sure. Now, there's lots and lots of theories. The one that your children are going to hear about the most in their textbooks is that asteroid or that meteorite hitting the earth. But to me, that really causes more questions than it does answers. Because how do you selectively kill stuff on the other side of the planet? Like, for instance, how do you selectively kill just the dinosaurs and leave the amphibians on the other side of the planet? I'm aware of about 27 theories of what killed the dinosaurs. I brought roughly 5 of them with me. Again, the chief being that asteroid hitting the earth. Number 2, an exploding star flooded the earth with intense radiation, resulted in fatal mutation for dinosaur offspring. Number 3, the earth's climate became too warm, too cold, too dry, or too wet for the dinosaur's health. Number 4, change in the dinosaur's diet resulted in weakened eggshells that broke after being laid. Sad to say, number 5 is a scientific theory, and that is that a laxative plant in the dinosaur's diet disappeared and they all died of constipation. I will let you decide if that one is possible, probable, or pitiful. I do have a thought about it after looking at all the evidence. It appears very plainly that this earth was changed dramatically after the flood. And I think those dinosaurs were able to thrive in the pre-flood world. And I do think they were on the ark. And I think after being on that ark for 371 days, the ramp coming down, I think basically they looked around and realized, hey, we're not in Kansas anymore. Because if you've ever seen what happens when a river floods its banks or an area floods, Nashville about 5 years ago, we got 18 inches of water in less than 24 hours. That's a lot of water. In fact, it was so much water that most of our sewers, most of our rivers, they couldn't contain it. And so we had large portions of our area that were flooded out. Well, let me tell you something. Water can do lots of damage. So imagine coming off that boat, looking around, being large, cold-blooded creatures needing lots of vegetation. And suddenly, those little warm, fuzzy mammals start thriving. I think the Ice Age was kicked off by the flood. In fact, if we had unlimited time, we would go into why I believe that, how I think it fits into Scripture. But the bottom line is this. I think 2 things got them. Number 1, changing climate after the flood. Number 2, what has man always done to animals we fear? We kill them, we hunt them. So back to Genesis chapter 9, verse 3. God tells Noah, now you can eat meat, okay? You're 15 years after the flood. Noah says, boys, go out and get us something to eat. They look over, they see a squirrel. They see a possum, and they see a stegosaurus. And they look back at that little squirrel, and they think, he's small and greasy. He's not going to feed a lot of people. They look at that possum, and they think, no, we'll leave him for the people in Arkansas. They look at that stegosaurus and they're thinking, we could eat on him for weeks. Mom and Dad, one of the things, though, that I want to keep bringing back to the forefront of your mind is this. Our kids have questions about these animals and other things, and they deserve the truth. Because if you don't take the time to invest and to put into their hearts and their minds the truth, as it filters in with God's word, eventually they will get their question answered, okay? But it may be from a guy who's wearing a starched white lab coat who has absolutely no belief in God, who believes it is his job to undo their faith. I touched on last time this slide right here, talking about how if you use the Bible things aren't all that old. You know, we've got the chronology from Adam all the way to Jesus. And the most common response that I get from well-meaning Christians is this: yeah, but what about the science? And their point is this: they believe that science and the Bible are at odds, because that's what we've been taught. Folks, there's no truth in that at all. God is the author of science. Okay? True science points back to Him. When they say, yeah, but what about the science? That's when I get all excited. Because when you stop and you really look at science, here's what you discover. Yeah, we've got a man-made theory that a lot of people have bought into that talks about millions and billions of years. But when you look at other actual evidence, like population statistics, numbers, you realize numbers can't lie, right? They're not able to lie. So what if we were to use numbers and talk about how old is the earth? Let's do that. Let's talk about the human population. We know every 35 years the population is doubling. We've been taking the census long enough to know, even with famines, with wars, disease, every 35 years it's doubling. So if you guys think traffic on I-25 is bad now, just wait. It's coming. And if you think you guys are in forever construction, guess what? It's just that's it, forever. So let's do this. Let's say we got two people. We'll call them Adam and Eve. This started 1 million years ago. Now, that's conservative, because most evolutionists would put Homo sapiens starting about 3 million years ago. Well, 1 million years ago. Average generation, 42 years, again, staying very conservative. Average family size, 2.4 kids per family. That's really conservative. Because most of you know your grandparents, great-grandparents, they had much, much bigger families, right? You do the math, the total population should be 10 to the 5,000th power. That means a 10 with 5,000 zeros after it. Now, I could only fit 1,000 on this screen. That means we need 4 more screens of zeros coming out all the way out into the floor. 10 to the 5,000 power. Here's the interesting thing about that. Out of the entire known universe, everything that the Hubble has looked at, they've done the math, and it would only hold somewhere around 10 to the 100th people. I just said 10 to the 5,000. That means for every area the size of a quarter, there should be 500 people. And we hope they use deodorant, right? All right, what if we do this? What if we redo set it up again? This time we start with two people, we'll call them Adam and Eve, but we start just 6,000 years ago. Same generation time, 42 years, same family size, 2.4 kids per family. You run the math, lo and behold, population should be about 8.34 billion. You say, wow, Brad, that's a whole lot closer to reality. But still, you're too much. We know we just clicked over 7 billion, right? Right. But what happened about 4,000 years ago that knocked us back to just 8? The flood. Folks, numbers don't lie. Man-made theories might, but the numbers don't. And so use these opportunities when you're talking to your kids about math, when you're talking to them about the census that we have to take every so many years. Talk to them about how the fact that, you know what, this really supports the biblical genealogies. In fact, we've been taking numbers since the book of Numbers. It's one of the most exciting books, right? And yet, here's what our kids are getting a steady right here. Big bang, explosion. Look at the last sentence on this page. In a closed universe, a big bang may occur once every 80 to 100 billion years. Somebody show me the science in that sentence right there. Because you might as well say, Once upon a time. That's like fairy tale stuff right there. I had a youth minister one time ask me the question that you see on the screen. You know, could God have used a big bang to get us to where we are today? Before I answer that question, I want you to think about how many of those textbooks actually talk about where the original matter for that big bang came from. They don't do that, do they? We talked last night about the fact that what they really do is they say, well, you know, maybe it came from this little bitty point in space. In fact, let me back up. This is the 2002 issue of Discover, where supposedly everything in the universe came from that red dot. They say that's the actual size of the universe at 10 to the minus 34 seconds from the Big Bang. Actual size. Look at the subheading. I'm going to blow it up so you guys can read it. It says the universe burst into something from absolutely nothing. Zero. Nada. As it got bigger, it became filled with even more stuff that came from absolutely nowhere. Okay, now again, let me ask you, where's the science in that? Because that right there, my friends, that requires a whole lot more faith than saying, in the beginning, God created. Could God have used a big bang to get us to where we are? Take a look in your Bibles. Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void. Darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the surface of the waters. Think with me for just a moment. This was a water-covered heavenly body, right? Does it talk at all about the sun yet? Does it talk about the sun yet? Does it talk about any other heavenly bodies? No, the only two things created on day one were what? Heaven and earth. So this Big Bang, we got a little bit of a problem. Because according to them, in 3.4 seconds, everything radiated into outer space. We get this ordered universe. Okay, problem, you just violated the first and second law of thermodynamics. Number one, you created matter from nothing. Number two, you went from a chaotic explosion to an ordered universe. Do you ever get order from a chaotic explosion? Like, how many times when they're blasting on the side of the road to do construction, do you see these nice, neat, round rocks? No, you see chunks, right? And those chunks aren't exactly in a neat, orderly fashion. And yet, that's what they're talking about. How do they explain it? Because, again, what they're doing is they're violating laws of science just to get their theory jump-started. Well, take a look at what Paul Davies said. Paul Davies, evolutionist, he says this: the Big Bang represents the instantaneous suspension of physical laws, the sudden, abrupt flash of lawlessness that allowed something to come out of nothing. He says it represents a true miracle. And my question is, why do you get upset when I say in the beginning God created, but yet you can act like, oh, we're just going to suspend all of these scientific laws for a moment, blow everything up, get an ordered universe, and then resuspend everything? You know, we're going to get rid of gravity, get rid of the first law, second law of thermodynamics. We're going to blow this little pea-sized thing up, and from that little pea, we're going to get all this stuff. No, I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. And in fact, here's the reality, and I want you guys to remember this. True astronomers, they know the Big Bang Theory is dead. They just don't have another godless theory to replace it with. I'm going to show you a quote from a guy by the name of Bob Berman. He is an astronomer, and in this journal, he was writing to his colleagues, his fellow astronomers. He said, we need to start putting a warning before every article that talks about the Big Bang. Look at what his warning says. Warning, the following contains contemporary cosmology. Reading it can produce disorientation and confusion. Nobody knows what's going on, and nothing you read here is likely to be true. Now, that's one astronomer writing in a peer-reviewed journal to his fellow astronomers. How do we write it in textbooks? It's fact. Right? Let's get back to that question. Could God have used the Big Bang to get us to where we are today? On that first day, do you know what the earth looked like? Sometimes we don't think about this. It was a water-covered heavenly body. You say, Brad, how do you know that? What was the Spirit of God moving over? It was waters. Remember, God hadn't brought forth land yet. So this was literally like a water ball. Okay, question. Do we know the temperature at which water boils? Yeah. It's either 100 degrees or 212, depending on which system you use. At that temperature, water turns into steam, evaporates out. Okay, folks, that Big Bang took place at a temperature allegedly off the charts. Millions of degrees. How do you go from a 1,000,000-degree explosion to having a water-covered heavenly body on the same day? You can't. Now, add to that, according to Scripture, I asked you guys earlier, how many of you think the Bible is inspired? Pretty much everybody raised their hand, right? According to Scripture, what day were the sun, the moon, the stars created on? Day 4. So here's what I need you to remember. Try to think about tucking the Big Bang into this right here. According to God's Word, there were plants, trees, flowers, fruit-bearing trees on this earth before there was ever anything else out in space. Now, if you can harmonize that with the Big Bang, I'd love to hear about it. And right about now, some of y'all are going, wait, but that, you couldn't do that because, that would be like, what, miraculous? Yeah, that's part of the point. By the way, Jesus getting out of the tomb, that was a miracle. And it gives everybody in this room hope, doesn't it? Also, check this out. Bible says water first. Spirit of God moved over the surface of the waters. Then land. Evolution says land first. And finally, after gazillions of years, it cooled down enough and we got water. Have you ever asked yourself, where'd the water come from if you're an evolutionist? I mean, as a Christian, I understand God created it day one. But if you don't believe in God, where did water come from? Had a university professor one time say, it came from the water cycle. I was like, nice try, Sparky, but really, in order to have a water cycle, you first got to have what? You got to have water. You don't just get to have a cycle without water. Well, y'all be happy to know, 2009, they finally figured out where the water came from. It was delivered by meteorites. Now, I didn't realize that meteorites were in the water delivery business. Furthermore, when a meteorite hits our atmosphere, what would happen to the water? It would burn up. Guys, they can't even explain water. And yet, they're going to say, was your ancestor a sea sponge? This is your ancestor. Okay, well, it may be theirs, but it's not mine. But again, here's the catch. I love the fact that we got so many young people in this room because a lot of them are going to be digesting exactly what I'm talking about this weekend. They're going to run off to school and they're going to hear about things like a geologic column. All these different eras, the Jurassic, Triassic, Carboniferous, Cretaceous period. Had one young man, he and I were talking about it. I said, so they've taught you the geologic column? He named it top to bottom. He said, yes, sir, they tested us on it. I said, well, did they actually tell you how that geologic column came into existence? He said, no, sir, they didn't tell us that. I said, I didn't think so. Because that column right there, it was built in the 1800s based almost solely on assumptions. We didn't have a clue about things like canyon formation, how the layers were put down over time. Well, lo and behold, 38 years ago, all of our assumptions were blown away in just one day. 38 years ago, Mount St. Helens erupted, and for those of you sitting out there going, is that really 38? Yes, you are that old. 38 years ago, that thing erupted, and when it did, we learned more about geology in 1 week than we had learned the previous 100 years. Folks, let me tell you something. The most studied volcano of our lifetime. I want you to imagine, I throw you a bottle of Coke. Now, I know the young people are like, what's a bottle? Don't, just go with me. Bottle of Coke, shake it up as much as you can, and then you pop the lid. What's going to happen? Yeah, you're going to get a shower, right? That's pretty much what happened here. May the 18th was the day that it actually erupted. Now, just to kind of give you a really good understanding of what was going on, they had seismographs, they had all kinds of recordings on this mountain. The week in which it erupted, it was growing 35 feet in girth a day. I tell young people, it's like a big zit just waiting to explode. Here's what happened. North face slid off, right? When it did that, it was like popping that Coke. And all of a sudden, all of the steam, all of the heat, all of the pressure was released, and that mountain quite literally was reduced to rubble in just a matter of seconds. My oldest son and I, we were there on the 30th anniversary of the Mount St. Helens eruption. And I want to share with you very quickly 5 things that we have learned about Mount St. Helens using the acronym SUPER, S-U-P-E-R. 5 things that you can go there today, check me out on it. The S is for those striatal layers. Now, pretty much everybody in this room has probably seen the layering in the earth, right? You drive down the interstate, you see all those different colors, the different layers. Scientists have come along, they've given them names, they've given them ages. Of course, those ages are like vast old ages, right? Here's kind of what I'm talking about. That's a bluff about 120 feet tall, and the reason I know that, Will and I, we actually were standing right over here, filmed a little piece of a documentary. Evolutionists would say that the rock on top, that's sedimentary rock. It's over 100 million years old, according to them. The only problem with that is everything that you are looking at was laid down in 1 week in 1980. So here's what I'm saying. If you were born before 1980, I can look at you and say, you're older than a rock, and be truthful. In fact, we've got video evidence in certain parts of the park, like below that yellow line right there. All of those layers put down May the 18th, 1980 in the original eruption. There was a secondary eruption, June the 20th. I tell people, basically it burped, right? Put all of the layers in between those 2 lines. There was another secondary eruption, March the 19th, 1982, that dropped the top on. Here's my point. Everything you're looking at right there on the screen was put down in just 2 years. Not 2 million, not 2,000, not even 200 years. It's all just 2. So we know today that layering effect, it doesn't take long periods of time. In fact, while we were out there, I asked one of the guys, I said, hey, how is this happening? And so he started explaining when lava comes out, when those pyroclastic flows start oozing out like we're seeing in Hawaii right now. He says, oftentimes what will happen, he said, it's like taking a broom across a tile floor. Any of you ladies ever swept up a lot of dust? You know, when you sweep on a tile floor, what does it leave behind? A little bit of that dirt, right? And you got to kind of go back and get it. he says same thing's happening. Those lava flows come down and they leave a fine layer. It cools, it hardens, it makes a layer, and then guess what comes right on top? Another lava layer. And again, leaves just a little bit until layer upon layer in just a matter of hours. You've got this right here. So the S is for those striatal layers. The U is for upright logs. Now, on the north sector of Mount St. Helens, there's a lake called Spirit Lake. There you see a picture of it fairly soon after the volcano erupted. When it erupted, basically what happened is all the trees on the nearby ridge instantly lost their branches, and the force of that volcano flushed those trunks into Spirit. A buddy of mine by the name of Dr. Steve Austin has been doing extensive research there. You see him and one of his colleagues there at the bottom of the screen in scuba gear. And he shared with me, he said, Brad, what we're seeing is this. These massive trees have been floating in a log mat for decades. He said after decades upon decades, the heavy root end will finally sink down, and he said they bob straight up and down in the water. And Will and I, we actually saw several trees doing just that. I mean, they were horizontal, and they would go down 30, 40 feet down. And he told me, he said, Brad, only after several more years will those trees then eventually sink, standing straight up and down. He actually showed me video footage of fish swimming between trees in the bottom of Spirit Lake. It's kind of cool. You don't see fish swimming between trees, right? So this is what we're seeing from a catastrophe in Spirit Lake. And it's also what we see in the fossil record. Take a look at the screen. This is a picture of, you see at the base of this bluff, you've got 3 guys. But I want you to notice there's 5 fossilized trees going through several different layers. In fact, you got some that start out in the Carboniferous period. Supposedly that's 250 million years ago. They grow up through the Triassic period. Okay, here's what that would mean if the evolutionists were right. That means this tree died and it just stuck around, waited for a couple of 100 million years while these layers gathered up around it. Okay, if you're a dead tree, you just going to sit there and wait for millions of years, or would you decay and rot? By the way, look carefully at those pictures for just a minute. The layers. Had a young lady one time, she was probably about 22, 23. She came up running after I got done at a university. She was hot. Found out why. She was an evolutionary biologist major. She said, are you trying to tell me that the geologic column is not real? I said, well, help me understand something. Why do you think it is real? She starts rattling off the recycled stuff that I've heard hundreds of times. I said, wow. If you can answer one question, I will sit here and listen to you all night long. I just want you to answer me one question. She said, all right, what? I said, you're telling me you've bought into the idea that the bottom is the oldest stuff and the youngest stuff is at the top and we can date everything in between accordingly. She said, yeah. I said, okay, where did the next layer come from? She said, what? I said, the next layer, because you got all these layers. So like if we got this layer, where did the stuff for the next layer come from? Is that like space dandruff? Okay, some of you guys have heard the expression deer in the headlights. It was like a computer resetting. She was just like, and I kid you not, after about 15 awkward seconds, she said, we didn't discuss that. I said, well, don't you think that's kind of important to know where the stuff came from? If you're going to tell me that each one of these layers represents millions of years, maybe you could tell me like how the layers got there. Because I got a good answer. How about a catastrophe? That would do it. but a catastrophe means very quickly. By the way, it'd be one thing if like we only had one or two examples. We got these things all over the place, right? So my family and I, we were in Nova Scotia not too long ago, where you've got polystrate fossils in a bay, joggings, where water goes in and out of here quicker than basically anywhere on the planet. Why is that a big deal? That's a big deal because you got fossils that are transcending through several different layers. Guys, if the geologic column is true, you shouldn't see this right here. Because otherwise what that means is that tree must have grown up through like solid rock. And yet again, it's all over the place. It'd be one thing, again, if I only had one example, they're on different continents. So these by themselves pretty much totally wipe out the geologic column. So the U is for upright logs. The P is for peat formation. So while we were there, we had the opportunity to take a little bit of a helicopter ride into the volcano, did some aerial photography. One of the things that you'll notice if you look, the log mat is still there. That's 30 years after the original volcano. It's still floating. A lot of the trees still floating. And if you walk down to the log mat or if you take a helicopter over it, one of the things you'll notice is there's not a stitch of bark on any of those logs. The reason? It's all in the bottom of the lake. Those logs have been bumping together on the surface of that water for 30 years. There's not any bark on them left. My buddy Steve Austin, he told me, he said, Brad, we're finding peat beds 10, 12, 15 feet deep in the bottom of Spirit Lake. You say, who cares, Brad? What's the big deal? Peat is a precursor for making coal. They're making coal in the bottom of this lake during our lifetime. Now chew on that one for just a minute. Because most of you went to school and you learned that coal was laid down during the Carboniferous period 250 million years ago, before the dinosaurs. And yet we're making it during the lifetime of men in Spirit Lake. So the P is for peat formation. The E is for erosion, rapid erosion. If I didn't tell you anything at all about these canyons other than the fact that they're about 600 feet deep, you might look at that picture and think that the water right there in the middle, that carved out those canyons. Because that's what we're told, right? Well, that water didn't have anything to do with those canyon formations. And the reason I know that, when you first enter into the blast zone of Mount St. Helens, one of the things that you'll notice very, very quickly is that volcano did not go just straight up. It also went out. So picture this for just a moment. You got this mountain, it's got snow and ice on it. It's growing 35 feet in girth a day. All of the snow and the ice on this sector right here slid down into the valley the week before it erupted, and then it went boom. What do you think happens to snow and ice when it comes in contact with lava? It instantly turned to steam, and it had to go somewhere. So what it did was it actually blew steam vents 600 feet deep in 2 days. 2 days. Not 2 million years, not 2,000, 2 days. And yet, what are we told over and over? Millions of years, Colorado River carved out the Grand Canyon from solid rock. Let me see a show of hands real quick. How many of you in this room remember being taught that the Colorado River carved out the Grand Canyon? Most of you. All right, we're going to learn something. Well, here's what we know. Here's what is a fact. We know the Grand Canyon exists. Two different interpretations, right? You got evolutionists who say it was formed slowly, a little bit of water, lots of time. Then you got creationists to say, time out, hold up. We have a living laboratory called Mount St. Helens that showed us you can do this quickly, lots of water, little amount of time. And yet, what they're trying to do is erase the line between an evolutionist interpretation and what is a fact. And so our kids' textbooks, they just say stuff like this all the time. Colorado River cut through layer upon layer of rock, millions of years. Well, folks, if you don't remember anything else from this lesson, remember this. That river didn't carve out that canyon. And the reason I know that, if you look up at the screen on the right-hand side, you'll notice the canyon where the river enters the canyon. It's over by the Navajo Indian Reservation. It is an elevation of 2,800 feet. Scientific fact, you can't refute it. You don't trust me? Take a GPS, head out to the Navajo Indian Reservation. You'll be at an elevation about 2,800 feet. Now, the south rim, where everybody likes to look out and see the handiwork of God, that's sitting at an elevation of about 6,900 feet. Here's what that means. In order for that river to have carved that canyon, that river would have had to have flowed uphill about 4,000 feet in elevation. Now, I'll grant you, I'm not a hydrologist, okay? But I am smart enough to know water seeks the lowest level, right? That river didn't carve that canyon. And yet, over and over and over, what we're told, millions and millions of years. The R is for rapid recovery. I took this picture literally like first 5 minutes into the blast zone, and as you guys can tell, stuff's back. You know, when Mount St. Helens, those of you who remember, when it first blew, scientists responded by saying it would take 50 to 60,000 years before it would recover. Because it looked like an A-bomb went off. I mean, it was like nothing. Then they came back and self-corrected and said it'd be about 30,000 years. Well, that's 30 years to the day. And it's back. In fact, those elk were some of the first creatures that came back. Now, elk have very, very tough hooves, right? And they would walk out across the pyroclastic flow. They would chip off the newly formed rock, and then elk do what elk do. They fertilize. And all of a sudden, you started getting more life, more animals, more plants. And yet again, for those of you who remember, when this thing went off, it knocked out all plants, all life. In fact, some of you may remember there were people who were warned. They said, hey, it's about to go, and they wouldn't evacuate. There was one guy, he had a general store. He's still there somewhere. Now, he hadn't come out to sell anything lately because he got covered up. It was like a bomb. Now, think about this. This is the perfect test case for evolution because it's like a blank slate. You have nothing growing, nothing living. So if evolution is true, surely we're going to get like new plants, new animals, stuff evolve. We're going to be able to see it, right? Everything that's come back, we've already categorized. Which begs the question, you know, why don't we see like animals with Kevlar umbrellas or volcano-proof something? Because, you know, that's what they tell us, right? Man, we lived up in trees and we ran out of food, so we had to learn to walk upright and run across the prairie to get our food. Folks, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And the reason I say it's stupid, because if we really could do that, if we were up in trees, we'd say, you know what, I think I'm going to evolve like two-leg walk. Who in this room would not evolve flight so you don't have to fight traffic all the time? Because I guarantee you we'd save a whole lot more time and energy there. And oh, by the way, if we could do it, why haven't other animals? Because last time I checked, there's some animals, their food supply starts to go down, and you know what? They don't just go, hey, you know what? Well, I need to learn how to walk uprightly so I can get out there and... No, they die. I'll tell you what happened. Instead of us evolving upright stance, maybe God created us with intelligence. And he created apes over here and man over here. And the apes he allowed to live in the trees. And man, we've been walking around since Adam. You know, one of the things that I hope you're beginning to see is it's really easy for them to put statements in our kids' textbooks that really cloud up everything. They got beautiful color pictures now. They'll have the evolutionary tree of life and all these things. But if you can train your child to start looking at things and asking questions, oh, you got this tree of life. Where's the evidence of connecting all this stuff? You got all of this alleged proof of evolution. Where is the proof? I was in New Zealand one time, and I don't ever, when I'm doing a Q&A, in fact, I'm going to hopefully do a Q&A with you guys here in just a little bit. I usually will never, ever give up the mic to somebody and just let them hold it, because you're not ever sure what that person's going to say, okay? This was in a community forum. This guy had just been wearing me out, and I finally reached the point I was like, that's fine, give him the mic. I said, here's the deal. I want you to give me just one proof of evolution. And he was all excited. Oh, yeah. And if you've ever done any public speaking, you know when somebody pauses, it gets really awkward, doesn't it? You start, 5 seconds of silence is like a long time. I let this guy go for like 30 seconds, and it was uncomfortable. I just kept saying, please give us one proof of evolution. And then I waited. And he's doing this, looking around, just kind of looking. Finally, takes the mic and says, fruit flies. Fruit flies. What about fruit flies? We've got blind fruit flies now. Okay, all right. Help me understand. So we started out with a fruit fly. We mated it with another, and the whole crowd was like, fruit fly. And we got a what? A fruit fly. So that's your best proof of evolution right there? I said, could you even tell this group how evolution works? Like, what is the mechanism? I kid you not, this dude, he handed me back the microphone because he didn't have an answer. Oh yeah, he knew all the recycled garbage that's in the textbooks. Well, you know, but everybody believes it. Everybody. Well, guess what? Last time I checked, I'm somebody. So not everybody. You think about coal. If I asked you how long ago was it laid down? Again, you know what they say? Millions of years. We've known for long periods of time it doesn't take millions of years to make coal. But here's what drives me crazy. Your kids learn this stuff in the textbook. They learn about the Carboniferous period, but they don't learn things like, oh, guess what? We found a bell in a lump of coal. Which kind of begs the question, you know, that fits in their timeline right where the arrow is, which would be before the dinosaurs. Which means you got fish that were making dinner bells. Or maybe we could explain it a little bit better with a different model. That is a creation model that talks about Tubal Cain, an instructor of every craftsman in bronze and iron, because that bell's not the only thing we found in coal. We found necklaces. We found pots. All of these things are human-made. And yet, we're supposed to buy into this idea that things are millions of years old. Well, I, for one, don't buy into it. When we come back, here's what we're going to do. We're going to spend about 30, 40 minutes talking a little bit about some of the evolutionary hoaxes you've been taught. And I'm going to open it up for your questions, your comments, because hopefully all of this has stimulated some, hey, what about this or what about that? And to me, that's when some of the best learning happens. So take about a 10-minute break, let you guys get up, stretch your legs, and then we'll come back for our final hour together. Thank you.